I'm Julia Monroe, 32 years old. Last month, I was about to put down a deposit on my very first home, a charming, gabled house on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. It was the result of 11 years of non-stop work, juggling 3 jobs, sleeping on a folding chair in a cramped studio apartment, skipping meals, out just to save. I had managed to save nearly $420,000. Enough to buy the house, do some renovations, and still have an emergency cushion. But with one click on my banking app, that entire amount was gone. I froze. My account balance was down to a few $100. The transaction history showed a full wire transfer into an account under the name Franklin Monroe, my father. I didn't speak for several minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt a wave of cold wash over me, like someone had poured a bucket of ice water down my spine. When I called him, his voice carried no surprise. "Thanks for your naivety," he said, flatly, like he was reporting the weather. "That money will now help Ethan build a more promising future." Ethan, my younger brother, he had just flunked out of college for the second time. You might ask, how did things get to this point? I used to ask myself the same thing, but the truth had been scattered across the 30 years I lived in the Monroe household. I had just never wanted to face it head on. I grew up in a 2-story traditional house in the suburbs of Hendersonville, serene on the outside, a machine of control on the inside. My mother, Linda, was a human resources professional at a major insurance firm. She scheduled everything: meals, homework, extracurriculars, even how long I was allowed to talk to friends on the phone. My father, Franklin, was a financial analyst. He never gave me spending money without demanding detailed logs of how it was used. I once got scolded for buying a magazine without asking. I didn't have my own room until I was 14, and even then, they'd walk in without knocking. My mother called it responsible parenting. To me, it was constant invasion. They controlled how I dressed, what I read, and who I was allowed to befriend. I wasn't allowed to attend summer camps unless they were resume building. But Ethan, he lived on a completely different planet. He was 4 years younger and treated like some kind of reward after a hard life. He had his own room at age 8, got video game consoles, expensive bikes, and was forgiven every time he broke the rules. When Ethan smashed the living room TV in a tantrum, my parents said, "Boys need space to let it out." Meanwhile, I got locked out of the house for coming home 10 minutes late. Maybe that favoritism is what made me so desperate to break free early. I started working at 16, hiding my tips in the back of an old shoe drawer. At 18, I was attending community college while waiting tables. By 19, I had moved out, into a shared apartment with 3 roommates, 45 minutes from my parents' house. My dad told me that day, "You'll be back within 6 months." But I never went back. I started saving, not much, but steadily, and I never told them how much I had. I used to think every kid was monitored by their parents like a flagged bank account. But I didn't realize until college that most of my friends could decide simple things: what to eat, what to wear, what to play, without needing a signed permission slip. In my house, every choice had to be approved. I wanted to take a ballet class? No. Too time-consuming, won't help with college. I asked to cut my hair short? Absolutely not, it's not feminine. Every time I pushed back, my mother would pull me into the dining room, where she kept a thick gray folder documenting my non-compliance, like some HR quarterly review. My mother, Linda Monroe, never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Her tone was flat, concise, and cut like a 10 p.m. email from your boss. My father, Franklin, was different. He made me feel like a bad investment he needed to cut losses on. If I got a bad grade, he'd open an Excel spreadsheet detailing every penny spent on school, then ask coldly, "Was this worth a C+?" But with Ethan, no one kept score. Ethan had everything I ever wanted. Not the material stuff, but freedom. He chose to play guitar and never practiced. He dropped his AP classes because they were too stressful. He skipped a week of school to reignite his passion for life. Every time Ethan failed, my parents didn't just forgive him, they invested more. He once lost nearly $2,000 of his high school startup's budget. My dad's response? At least he had the guts to try. Meanwhile, if I overspent by $20 on books, I had to file a report. There's one night I'll never forget. I was 17, struggling to finish my college essay for the University of Minnesota, the one school I genuinely wanted. My laptop froze. Ethan, 13 at the time, barged into my room without knocking, as usual. He sat on my chair, munching cookies over my scattered papers, and asked, "Why are you trying so hard?" I held back, because no one here is going to bail me out if I fail. Ethan laughed. "You're overthinking. Mom said they'll always help if we need it." I looked at him and said, "No anger, just cold truth." "Yeah, you're their child. I'm just a passenger on this ship." I don't know if Ethan understood what I meant, but the next day when I got home, my room was ransacked. My computer was locked with a new password. On the desk sat a handwritten note from my dad. "If you want to do everything on your own, start by getting your own computer." I didn't ask. I knew Ethan had said something, and my parents didn't need verification. I walked to the neighbor's house. Miss Doris, a 70-something widow who used to give me pumpkin pie every holiday. She lent me her late husband's old computer. I sat at her kitchen table for 3 hours, finished the essay, and asked to print 2 copies. I got into Minnesota. I didn't say a word to my family the entire summer. My mother hosted a small party to celebrate my acceptance, mostly to show off. She had me give a speech. I stood up, smiled just enough, and said 3 sentences. "Thank you all for coming. I couldn't have done this without those who taught me how to survive alone, and a good printer." The room laughed, thinking it was a joke, but my mother didn't. She frowned through the rest of the evening. From that day on, I stopped trying to be the good daughter. I worked in the library, did laundry for others, delivered food on weekends. I never asked them for a dime. But I also never told them I was saving. Every month, I diverted 35% of my paycheck to a separate account, under my own name. No cosigners. No devices linked to the Monroe Wi-Fi ever accessed it. Thought I'd done enough to protect myself, until I realized even when I thought I had escaped, they were still there, lurking behind every trace, every bit of data they'd trained me to leave behind, since I was just a kid who didn't know how to set a password. I started working before I was even old enough to drive alone. My first job was at a tiny cafe called Brewhaven, just 3 blocks from my high school. That's where I earned my first tips, scrubbing espresso machines and pretending to smile through gritted teeth while waiting on table 5. I hid those early tips inside a hollowed-out copy of Pride and Prejudice, cut with a razor blade under the dim glow of a borrowed desk lamp. My dad once said, "Working too young will make you neglect your studies." But I didn't need his approval. I needed a way out. At 19, I moved out. No goodbye, no tears, just a cold text. "I'll be fine. Don't come see me off." I took a Greyhound bus, 2 suitcases full of old clothes and a set of cookware my mom had saved for Ethan, but I borrowed it. I moved to Raleigh for the University of North Carolina, where I had a partial scholarship in information systems. I lived in a damp ground floor room and turned myself into a ghost. I cooked late at night to avoid waking others, worked the tech help desk from 5 to 8 a.m., then studied till dark. On weekends, I fixed computers for nearby residents. There wasn't time to feel lonely. I became a machine, cold, precise, unemotional. For 4 years, I never went home. Every holiday, I stayed in the dorms or worked overtime. Ethan once emailed asking if I'd come home for Christmas. I didn't reply, because I knew if I did, I'd just be another number in Dad's spreadsheet. At 23, I graduated with honors and got a job at a small cybersecurity firm called Sentinel Logic. The pay wasn't great, but it gave me freedom. I saved 40% of every paycheck. I still rode the bus, wore thrifted clothes, turned down lunch invites. Within 3 years, I had saved over $100,000. But I didn't stop. Every tax return, every bonus, every side gig, straight into an isolated account. No shared logins, no linked devices. That was my mother's lesson. If someone has access, they have control. Everything shifted when I met Leah. We met at a tech seminar in Charlotte. She was a UX designer, smart, calm, and had this way of looking at me that made me feel seen, not measured. We debated personal finance app security for hours, then ended the night over beer and a smile I carried with me all the way home. We started texting, then video calls. Then, 8 months in, we moved in together. Leah was the first to ask, "Do you actually want to own a house, or is that just how you prove to your parents you don't need them?" I paused for a long time. Then I said, "Both." Leah didn't try to talk me out of it. Instead, she helped me reframe the goal. 3 bedrooms, a small home office, a sunny kitchen, and a backyard garden for basil and mint. Things I once wrote off as unnecessary. She was the first person who said, "You deserve a life you don't have to shrink to fit." We started house hunting. We saw at least 15. I rated each one with a custom encrypted checklist, like coding an algorithm for happiness, and then we found it. A quiet bungalow tucked down a maple-lined street. Price $405,000. Almost an exact match to what I'd saved over a decade. Leah squeezed my hand as we stepped out of the sunlit kitchen and whispered, "If you don't do this now, you'll never believe you're worthy of it." I smiled, I believed, and maybe that's why I didn't see the warning signs. Because I'd started to believe I could finally live without always looking over my shoulder. Until I discovered the one watching me never really stopped. I still remember that Sunday afternoon, not because of the sunlight, but because of the chill that ran through me when my father said, "The granite-tiled kitchen in that house is a bit dark. You should consider the lighting." I froze, my fork still holding half a roasted potato suspended between plate and mouth. Leah looked at me, puzzled. My mother casually sipped her wine as if nothing unusual had just been said. I had never shared any details about the house with them. No photos, no texts, no phone calls. I swallowed the lump in my throat and asked as lightly as I could, "How do you know about that kitchen?" My father shrugged. "You must have mentioned it on the phone last week." But last week I had said exactly 2 things. I'm considering a house on Grove Street, and I haven't made any decisions yet. I didn't mention the kitchen, especially not the cool gray granite with silver veining, something you could only see in person. From that moment on, I started paying attention. 3 days later, I got a notification from my banking app. Login confirmed from a new device at 3:17 p.m. I was at the office at that time. My personal laptop was at home. No one else had my password. No one had biometric access. I immediately changed all my credentials, enabled 2-step verification, and called the bank. "We detected a login from an IP address in Asheville," the support rep said. "It doesn't match your saved devices." I asked them to temporarily freeze my account and requested the login history for the past 30 days. They emailed me the report within the hour, and I went numb. There were signs of repeated access every 3 to 4 days, going back 6 weeks. That night, I opened my personal laptop and ran a full security scan. The basic results showed nothing, but when I used our company's specialized deep scan malware tool, everything came to light. A hidden process was running, disguised as a system monitoring tool, but when I opened the internal code, it was clear. Keylogger, screen capture, and a microphone-based recording module. My whole body went cold. Leah walked in, saw me frozen in front of the screen, and asked, "What's going on?" I pointed at the lines of code. "Someone's been watching everything I do on this machine, every bank login, every email, even the floor plan I saved yesterday." She blinked. "How did that get on your computer?" It took nearly a full minute before I remembered. 4 months ago, my laptop started lagging after an OS update. During a brief visit home, a night when I gave in after my mother begged, my dad offered to clean up the system and reinstall drivers. He took my laptop into his office for nearly 2 hours. I remember being in the garden with my mom, pulling weeds from flower beds I didn't care about. When he gave it back, the machine ran smoother. I had thanked him. I had been foolish. I immediately used Leia's laptop to log into my bank account, and my heart sank the second I saw the balance, 74 cents. I checked the transaction history, one transfer made the morning before, for the full amount of $418,263.14. Everything I'd saved over 11 years, sent to an account labeled F. Monroe Holding. No bank created a corporate account under that name without showing me exactly who was behind it. Leah said nothing. She held me as I gasped for air, as I cried uncontrollably, as I pounded the table like a child who had just lost her mother. I nearly screamed. I was careful. I was so careful. I didn't use any home device. I didn't share any passwords. How did he do this? Leah gripped me tighter. Because you never thought he would. But Julia? He did, and we're going to get every last cent back. I held her hand. Everything around me had collapsed, but in Leah's eyes, I still had a place to start over. I stayed up all night. Leah had fallen asleep on the couch, her laptop still open, its glow casting light on the only face in the world that was still on my side. I couldn't close my eyes. In my mind, the transfer record played on repeat. F. Monroe Holdings, and that staggering number, $418,263.14. I had done everything right. I'd been financially independent since 16, never took a dime from anyone. Every dollar I saved was tracked in spreadsheets, each with a purpose. Every dream I dared to build laid on a foundation of sacrifice. And yet, with a single hidden line of code, he had taken it all. I called my father 6 times. No one answered. I texted, "I know everything, call me back now." Then emailed, then called again. By the time the sun rose, I knew they wouldn't respond. Unless I showed up at their door. I didn't tell Leia I was leaving, only left a note. If I'm not back in 3 hours, call the police. The Monroe house still looked as pristine as ever. Well-trimmed maple tree, American flag hanging just right. My father's SUV parked straight in the driveway. Nothing about it screamed crime scene. But I knew inside those walls, everything I'd built over the past 11 years was being repackaged into that disgusting phrase, family resource management. I didn't knock. I had a spare key. My mother was at the breakfast table, reading the paper, tea steaming beside her. She looked up like I had just dropped by for a visit. "Julia, you're up early." I cut her off. "Where's Dad?" He was in his office. When I opened the door, he was removing his reading glasses, smiling like some wise old movie dad. "You're here early." I didn't sit. I didn't breathe. "My bank account, you drained it." He tilted his head, as if waiting for me to continue. But I just stood there, waiting for any sign, shame, guilt, anything. There was none. "You're too young to understand this, Julia," he said, voice as flat as a machine. The money was used appropriately, to support Ethan's foundation. I let out a laugh. Dry, hollow. "You call that a purpose? Stealing from your own daughter to fund the son you spoiled into incompetence? That's your version of financial planning?" My mother entered just then and quietly shut the door behind her. "Julia, lower your voice. You don't understand. We did this for the family's future." "Emily?" I clenched my fists. "You never saw me as part of the family. I was just a tool, a walking ATM." My father remained calm. "We're simply reallocating resources. Ethan was just accepted into a national startup incubator. This investment secures our long-term future. A house, Julia, it only anchors you." I stared at him. "Your daughter is an adult independent with a stable career and a real plan. Ethan is a 28-year-old man-child who's never held a job longer than 3 months. Tell me again, who's anchored?" My mother reached for my shoulder for the first time in years. "Don't see this as betrayal. Your father was only trying to protect you from a bad decision." I pushed her hand away. "You hacked my accounts. Installed spyware. Under federal law, that's a violation of privacy and financial fraud. That's not protection, it's a crime. My father folded his arms. You wouldn't dare press charges against your own parents. I looked at him for a long time. In that moment, I wasn't the 15-year-old girl who got yelled at for spending $10 on books. I was a woman with intelligence, with evidence, and with resolve. You have 48 hours to return every penny. If not, I'm going to the police, and I won't be going alone. As I turned to leave, I saw my mother trembling, not from the cold. Ethan stood at the top of the stairs, wide-eyed. Are you serious? He croaked. You don't have to answer, I said as I stepped out the door. But if you keep that money, then you're no different from them. I walked into the sunlight without looking back. I left the Monroe house with my heart pounding like a war drum, but my face gave nothing away, not because I was calm, but because I had been preparing for this moment for over 2 months. I got in the car, locked the doors, pulled out my phone, and hit send. A 37-minute audio file, my full confrontation with my parents from start to finish. Uploaded directly to the emergency folder in a hidden Google Drive account Leah had helped me set up. It was also shared with my tech attorney, Mr. Terrence Roth, and a cybersecurity specialist I'd privately hired to handle the spyware on my laptop. Because my father was right about one thing, I wasn't going alone. Back home, Leah was waiting. I opened my laptop and logged into the secondary bank account, where I'd quietly moved most of my funds after spotting early red flags. The balance was intact, $351,274.33. Only $39,000 had been left in the compromised account, and I had left it there on purpose. You planned for this? Leah asked, stunned. Never trusting completely, I nodded. Is the first lesson you learn growing up in a household that demands quarterly financial updates? I sent Terrence the bank statements, all the screenshots, the spyware code I extracted from my laptop, and the transaction logs. By the end of the day, he called back. Half disbelief, half admiration. Julia, this isn't just a state violation. They've breached at least 3 federal statutes. If you're willing, we can file both civil and criminal charges. I didn't hesitate. Do it. 2 days later, I walked into the Asheville Police Department with Leah and Terrence. There, I filed an official complaint with all supporting evidence. Unauthorized logins, malicious code, the audio recording. The officer in charge, Lieutenant Davis, sat silent for a long time after reviewing everything. You know, he said, we see a lot of cases where kids steal from parents, but rarely the other way around. I looked him straight in the eye. That's probably because most victims lack proof, or they're used to swallowing it. I'm not. I didn't expect Ethan to show up the next day. He came to my door looking pale, gaunt, like someone fleeing the very world that had once coddled him. Are you really taking them to court? I nodded. No need to explain. I didn't know, he said. I thought it was some fund they'd set aside for me, but when I asked, Mom admitted everything. I said nothing, let him hear his own voice. I don't want a cent from them anymore, Ethan said quietly. And if you need a statement, I'll testify. I'll tell the truth. I didn't trust him immediately, but Leah glanced at me, then nodded. He's telling the truth. I thanked him, made no promises, because at this point it wasn't about Ethan anymore. It was about me. And not letting anyone rewrite my life story with well-rehearsed excuses. Within 2 weeks, the court accepted the lawsuit. My parents were served with subpoenas listing the charges: theft, violation of personal privacy, unauthorized system access, and installation of spyware without consent. They hired an expensive lawyer, triple-breasted suit, wire-rimmed glasses, voice smooth as oil. He didn't deny the spyware, but argued that it was a financial oversight measure to protect the daughter from making poor asset decisions. I almost laughed in the pre-trial room, but I didn't have to argue. I opened my laptop and played the video Leah had secretly recorded, showing me uncovering the spyware and the command lines linking my computer directly to my father's IP address at the exact moment of the bank transfer. Motionless evidence, but it said everything. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later. I knew they'd try to delay it, cloud it, distort it, But this time I had walked the full length of trust and come back with the one thing I couldn't afford to lose again: my dignity. The first hearing took place on a gray autumn morning at the Buncombe County Courthouse. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside my attorney, Deborah Klein, a sharp-eyed woman from New Jersey with a voice like a paper cutter and a stare no one held for more than 3 seconds. She was Terrence's recommendation, and within 5 minutes of our first meeting, I understood why. Deborah didn't care about feeling. She cared about results. Across the aisle sat my parents, looking polished and composed beside their attorney, Andrew L. Griggs, infamous for his moral reversal tactics in family lawsuits. I'd prepared for every dirty move. Deborah opened with a single, precise line. "Your Honor, this is not a family dispute. This is a series of calculated, deliberate, and unlawful actions: unauthorized surveillance, theft of personal funds, and illicit access to banking systems." Our first piece of evidence, Leah's video capturing my discovery of the spyware, complete with timestamps matching logins from my father's home IP. Next, a signed statement from the cybersecurity director at Sentinel Logic, my employer, confirming the software's non-commercial nature and high-level security threat. But the first blow that truly landed came from Dave Richards, branch manager at my former bank. On the witness stand, he carefully turned each page of his file. Miss Julia Monroe came to our office nearly 2 months ago and requested a secure transfer of her funds to another institution. She explicitly asked for full confidentiality and no digital trace. It was a legal request, executed per protocol. My father's face turned from white to ashen. He knew the narrative they had planned. Julia being financially reckless and overreacting to parental oversight was cracking. I took the stand next. I told the truth. No embellishment, no omissions. How I'd saved every dollar, how I was monitored without consent, and what it felt like to be robbed by the people who raised me. I didn't need to cry. My hurt lived in the silence where trust used to be. Their lawyer, as predicted, painted me as emotionally unstable, paranoid about her family, and being manipulated by her live-in partner. Deborah just smiled. If protecting your assets, planning your finances, and rejecting surveillance are symptoms of instability, maybe we need to redefine what responsible citizenship looks like. On day 2, Ethan arrived. He had already submitted his statement, but seeing him stand in court across from our parents was something I hadn't dared hope for. "I never asked for money," Ethan said, his voice shaky but steady. "When I found out my parents took it from my sister for me, I said no. They told me if I refused, I was betraying the family. I still refused." His voice cracked. "And if I have to choose between my conscience and my parents, I choose my conscience." No rebuttal came from the defense. They knew. They just never believed I'd bring it all into the light. The hearing closed on a Tuesday morning. Judge Karen McAllister, a seasoned African-American jurist with a reputation for clarity in tech civil cases, delivered her verdict in just 40 minutes. This court finds the defendants guilty of violating personal privacy, committing theft, and evading legal accountability through the guise of moral family obligation. The defendants are ordered to repay the $39,000 taken, plus $50,000 in damages for emotional distress, financial disruption, and legal expenses. I didn't smile. I just exhaled, truly and fully. For the first time in months, no longer counting every dollar, every login, every breath. My parents didn't look at me as they left the courtroom. My mother hid behind dark sunglasses. My father adjusted his tie. But I knew what they truly lost today wasn't the money. It was the right to ever again say, "We only wanted what's best for you." 1 week after the trial, I received a bouquet at the office. No card, no message, just a printed note. "We hope you'll reconsider. Family is always family." I didn't need to see who sent it. The choice of white lilies mixed with baby's breath said it all. It was my mother's go-to arrangement when she wanted to keep appearances without lowering herself. I handed the bouquet to the receptionist. "Give it to the waiting area. Don't bring any more up." I knew they'd keep trying, emails, desk calls, mutual friends nudging me to forgive for peace of mind. But what they didn't understand, or refused to understand, was that I wasn't angry anymore. I simply no longer allowed them access to my life. I changed all my bank accounts, cut off everyone who used to relay messages between us, and moved into a new apartment on the east side of Asheville, where the morning light hit the kitchen Leah and I designed together. I wasn't in survival mode anymore, and I no longer needed to hide my money in secret accounts. Sentinel Logic, where I had been a mid-level security engineer, offered me a new position, team lead for a project focused on protecting personal digital privacy, especially in cases involving surveillance from within one's own family. That offer came just a month after I posted a detailed article about my experience on a Women in Tech forum. I didn't name anyone, but every detail was real. And it spread faster than I expected. From there, speaking requests followed. First, internal conferences in the cybersecurity field, then universities, eventually financial freedom summits for independent women. The topic never changed. Privacy begins when you stop letting family control your passwords. Once, after a talk in Raleigh, a woman in her 50s approached me, trembling. My daughter once called me controlling. I didn't understand until I heard you. Now I know why she left. I said nothing, just placed a hand on her shoulder and walked away. A part of me wanted to say, there's still time. But I also knew some wounds don't need more words. As for Ethan, he did what I never thought he'd have the courage to do. He moved out. He rented a small apartment near his business school in Charlotte, juggling studies and a part-time barista job. When I visited him that first month, he was trying to cook dinner with a pan that stuck everything. No one warned me how hard and lonely living alone would be. I smiled. Then you're doing it right. We didn't talk much about the trial. Ethan never asked whether I'd reconcile with our parents, and I didn't need to say aloud that for the first time we were truly siblings. No referees, no golden child, just two adults learning to exist outside the shadow of the family name. Leah and I got legally married 3 months later. No wedding, no ceremony, just a quiet winter morning at the county clerk's office, with 2 close friends as witnesses. We walked home afterward, hand in hand, just quiet enough for no one to interrupt. I hung a copy of the court ruling in my office, not to brag about winning, but to remind myself. Freedom doesn't begin with a court victory. It begins the moment you dare to say enough. Some still call me cruel, that suing your own parents is unthinkable, but I don't live inside their imagination. I live with the truth I had to grow up with. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you once called family. One night, while teaching a virtual class on digital privacy, a student raised their hand and asked, "Do you think you went too far? I mean, they're your parents." I looked straight into the camera. "Sister, they are my parents, but I don't belong to them. I belong to myself." And I had to go a long way to reclaim that. One spring morning, just after I finished tending to the lavender pots on the porch, Leah stepped out with a silver gray envelope in her hand. She said nothing, just handed it to me and returned to the kitchen, where the smell of fresh waffles was beginning to fill the air. I recognized the handwriting, neat, slanted slightly right. It was my father's. I never expected a letter from him. Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever receive one, but I opened it because I no longer feared it could take anything from me. To Leah, if you're reading this, it means I've learned not to check someone's email history anymore. And maybe it also means I'm ready to admit you were right. Not because the court said so, but because I finally know it deep inside. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that in the end, I understood what it means to cross a line. And what it means to lose a daughter because I thought I had the right to keep her at any cost. No drama, no rambling, just one printed page signed Franklin. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't tell Leah. I didn't have to. Forgiveness, if it ever came, wouldn't come through a letter. It would come through him learning when to stay silent. how to show up the right way, and when to step back. A few weeks later, we bought our dream house, a modern farmhouse with white walls, a gray roof, wide windows, and a wooden fence Leah and I painted ourselves over 3 days. It had a study with built-in shelves, a sunlit kitchen perfect for spontaneous baking, and a backyard big enough for both a vegetable garden and a cozy table for friends. Right where the sunlight streamed through the skylight every morning, Leah placed a navy velvet box on the table, next to a cup of coffee and a smile that stopped my breath. No orchestra, no roses, just me and this house, if you want it. I didn't need to think. He once said, "You'll come crawling back in 6 months." It took me 11 years. But Leah, I'm finally home. We threw a small party. Our kind of celebration, with apple pie, acoustic guitar, a few close friends, and Ethan giving a toast that nearly broke me. When I was a kid, I thought Julia was just weird. Now I know. She was the only one brave enough to live honestly, and because of her, I learned how to be honest too. Thank you, sis. Life after that wasn't perfect because I no longer believed in perfect. Some nights, the old memories still woke me up, drenched in sweat from a surprise doorbell, but I had Leah. I had the freedom I fought for, and I had a job that gave me a reason. Every time I helped someone reclaim their account, I reclaimed a piece of myself. A year later, I was invited to speak at TEDx Asheville. The talk was titled, "Privacy Doesn't Begin with Technology. It Begins When You Stop Apologizing for Your Boundaries." It ended with a long-standing ovation I still feel every time I step on stage. I never replied to my father's letter, but that Christmas I sent a card. No name, just one line. No one has the right to control another person, not even the one who gave them life. I no longer live to be accepted, I live to choose whom I love, where I stay, whom I trust, and what dreams I build. Money can be stolen, memories can be twisted, but the ability to steer your own life, once reclaimed, can never be taken from you again, if you have the courage to hold on to it with both hands. Julia's story is a powerful reminder that family ties should never be used as an excuse to control or violate someone's privacy. In real life, many people grow up in toxic households and still feel guilty for setting boundaries. But the truth is, you're not selfish for protecting your assets, your dreams, and your dignity. Freedom isn't just having money in the bank. It's the ability to live by your own values, no matter who once tried to define you. What do you think about Julia's journey? Would you have the courage to stand up for yourself like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, true-life family stories.